Introduce my next guest. Attorney Corey Minor Smith is a thought leader on housing and poverty breaking strategies. She's a leading social justice advocate for mental health in communities across this nation. She produces roundtable conversations with youth in the community around these things. She's an extraordinary motivational speaker and author of her own autobiography / memoir, Driven. Attorney Minor Smith, welcome to Tonight on WURD.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
No, it's great to have you on. Sorry you had to hear that little rant here, but you know we get heated sometimes here on Tonight on WURD in our conversations. It's great. Thank you. It's so great to have you on. And first of all, I want folks, if you want to hear the full story on Attorney Corey Minor Smith, you should go to Amazon right now and pick up Driven. It's an extraordinary read. But Attorney Smith, I want you to give our audience a preface from your book so they can understand your life story in a way that doesn't spoil the book, but you've had experiences with mental health in your family, challenges with your own sort of upbringing, your nuclear family. You've overcome a lot to get to where you are. Give our listeners a sense of what your journey has been.
Well, thank you. To try to sum it up, essentially I went to 14 schools and lived in 3 different states and 8 different households. I'm often asked whether my family was in the military or if I was in foster care. I define it or describe it as being in community care because there were people who took me in that didn't have to. There were no court orders or anything of that nature, just people who wanted to help when they could, when my parents weren't available to. So to answer the question, no, I was not in the military. My family was not in the military, and I was not in foster care, but just in the households of those who took me in when they could.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're in your book, you talk a little bit about what it's like to live with loved ones who have mental illness, and we've had different medical professionals on this program to talk about what are some of the mental challenges that people are dealing with during the pandemic. Talk to us a little bit about how your experiences might help folks who are feeling mentally challenged during these times.
Well, it's a very complicated situation, just the day-to-day living when a person has mental health challenges, especially severe mental illness. And in my case, it was my mother who was diagnosed with manic depression, schizophrenia, and I named that diagnosis as a part of claiming the diagnosis and to help eliminate the stigma that's associated with mental illness. A lot of people, especially in our community, don't want to talk about mental illness and the impact that it may have on their particular household or in the community. But I think it's important to discuss mental illness, to discuss the resources that are available, and especially in this time when we're dealing with a global pandemic, because for those who have severe mental illness, a part of their symptoms that they experience includes delusions and hallucinations. And, you know, you just talked about conspiracy theories, things of that nature. People on a daily basis who are dealing with severe mental illness have those types of thoughts as a part of the symptoms that they're experiencing. So to have a global pandemic to this extent that has a lot of conspiracy theories in the atmosphere, you know, a lot of conflicting information coming from various sources, it makes it hard for just an average person to understand and comprehend and try to move forward. It'll make it, I would say, 100 times worse for a person with severe mental illness that already has difficulty with their perception of reality. So in some, you know, their symptoms are exacerbated by what is going on right now or other things that may occur similar to what we're experiencing right now.
You wear a lot of hats, Attorney Corey Minor Smith. One of those is that you've served as general counsel for a housing authority. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are some of the challenges around housing for our community? I mean, clearly, going forward through this pandemic, housing is going to become a much bigger issue as rents pile up or mortgages pile up. There have been some things put in place that people can't be evicted in certain cities and certain states. But from your perspective on the legal side of the housing world, you know, what's the best way forward for folks who are wrestling with some insecurities about their housing arrangements right now?
The best thing I can suggest is for people to communicate with the property owner. In my case, I work for a housing authority, and interestingly enough, a housing authority which provided housing for me and my family when I was younger. So I lived in public housing, and the very agency that owned the public housing buildings that I lived in, I am now general counsel for. But as general counsel, moving forward with evictions, for example, right now there is a moratorium on evictions, and that's from HUD, from the federal government, as well as the CARES Act that has recently passed. But then other private property owners who may receive HUD funding are also subject to that. It's not a, stop forever. It's just for what's going on right now. And many courts in local jurisdictions also have their court orders, which are putting a halt or canceling or rescheduling dates for civil cases. Now, it's a different matter for criminal cases, but with civil cases, there's more flexibility in the scheduling and rescheduling of hearings and pretrials, things of that nature. So as far as public housing, we are not moving forward on evictions that are based on non-payment of rent. But as far as criminal activity, still a civil case, but the underlying lease violation may involve criminal activity, we may still move forward. But the main thing is communicating between the property owner and the resident in order to resolve issues, especially in light of what we're dealing with right now with this coronavirus and the impact that it has on our families.
Right. So just to be clear, if you're living in housing that's HUD operated or HUD supported, evictions, there's a moratorium on evictions for everything except for criminal proceedings. Is that correct?
That's the general, but I was on a call a couple of weeks ago. It was like over 1,400 people on the call to listen in and see how we were to move forward. And again, I would stress that any resident who has a question about their housing, that they communicate directly with their manager, because each housing authority, has the discretion to move forward based on, their best judgment or best practices for their housing authority. But in general, the main thing is non-payment of rent, because a lot of people were impacted with losing their jobs, and we don't want to, put another strike against them by having them lose their housing when it's because of something that's out of their control, a national, a global disaster, if you will. So in this case, the main thing is non-payment of rent. Any other type of lease violation can be discussed with the property manager, and that's what I would suggest. Discuss it with the property manager and try to work things out. But as far as a strict rule, it's mainly non-payment of rent cases.
But your advice is people should call. Communication is obviously the first step. As I would imagine that while there are some folks in our listening audience who may have HUD supported housing, there are also some folks who are worried and they just have a private property owner. So communication would be the best step for them for sure.
And how the private property owners are involved in this is that they may provide housing under the Section 8, it's known as Section 8, the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So that is a HUD-funded program, and there may be restrictions on moving forward with, trying to terminate a HAP contract, the Housing Assistance Program contract, or otherwise terminating the lease between the private landlord and the resident. So again, communication is key with all of these different types of HUD-funded programs, because there are public and private HUD-funded housing programs. And it's just important for people to communicate, not guess about it or just automatically think, that they're going to be saved because of the coronavirus pandemic. They need to communicate with the property owner.
We've got to get ready to go to a quick break. Will you stay with me for one more segment, please, Attorney Corey Minor-Smith?
Sure, it's my pleasure.
Attorney Minor-Smith is a thought leader on housing and poverty-breaking strategies. She's also a leading social justice advocate for mental health in communities across this nation. She produces radio roundtable conversations with youth and community members to discuss ways to reduce the stigma associated with mental illness. And she does a whole lot of other things. I won't read the whole bio here, but we're happy to have her here on Tonight on WURD. You're listening to Tonight on WURD. I'm your host, James Peterson. We are live on WRD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, streaming on wordradio.com and the free WURD app. Download it now from the App Store or Google Play and take us with you wherever you go. We'd love to hear from you. Give us a call at 215-634